So tonight I am thrilled to be welcoming the dashing and legendary Calvin Trillin on the occasion of his new book, Quite Enough of Calvin Trillin, 40 Years of Funny Stuff. Calvin has been a good friend to the Strand. He's been a guest speaker here before. He is also frequently seen cruising our stacks. So contrary to the title of this featured book, we can never get enough of Calvin Trillin. Calvin has been a staff writer for The New Yorker since 1963, and he's written a weekly piece of comic verse for The Nation since 1990. His nonfiction books, well, we have a lot of his books over here, include American Fried, Adventures of a Happy Eater, Alice, Let's Eat, Further Adventures of a Happy Eater, Third Helpings, With All Disrespect, it's a lot of food books, More Uncivil Liberties, Travels with Alice, and About Alice. His works of nonfiction include Rumstruck, Floater, Templar Isn't Going Out, and American Stories. His books of verse include Obliviously On He Sails, which is the Bush administration in rhyme, A Heck of a Job, which is more of the Bush administration in rhyme. Calvin, he has written and performed two-man shows at the American Place Theater in New York City. In Quite Enough of Calvin Trillin, Calvin addresses the subjects including the horror of witnessing voodoo economics ceremony. The collection, it features poems about Sarah Palin, John Edwards, Bill Clinton, and Chris Christie. Frankly, I think it's hard to be dull with material like that. But so for tonight's format, Calvin's going to talk, and then we're going to open up this mic for questions from you. If you don't mind, I'll pass along the mic, and if you don't mind just standing up, because we have a really big audience, so everyone can hear. And then Calvin will stick around and sign copies of his book. So please welcome me in joining one of the America's great humorists, Calvin Trillin, back to the Strand. Thank you.
Well, one thing I should say about that introduction is that Nancy asked me if there was anything special I wanted her to say, and I thought it'd be nice to work the word dashing in there. That may explain that. It's nice to be at the Strand. It's nice to see Fred, who I've known for years. I actually knew his father, so Nancy's the third generation of Strand proprietor I've known. This is a book of so-called humor, and I'm sometimes asked, aren't you ashamed of making a living by writing snide, underhanded remarks about respectable people? And my only defense is it's not much of a living. Right? There's a piece in here about dealing with the wily and parsimonious picturesque Navaski. I think the first humor piece I published was in a magazine called Monocle that he edited. They were not big payers, Monocle. I sent them a piece and they accepted it and sent me a bill. And then Navaski went on to become the editor of The Nation and asked me if I would write a column for The Nation. And I said, how much were you thinking of paying for each column? And he said, something in the high two figures. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we've been paying 65. I said, that sounds like the middle two figures to me. So I got my high-powered literary agent, Robert Slowly Lesher, on the phone, and I said, play hardball slowly. And slowly got him up to 100. And a month or two after I started, Navaski came to me and said, what about these quotes? And I said, what quotes are those? And he said, did John Foster Dulles really say, you can't fool all the people all the time, but you might as well give it your best shot? I said, Victor, at these rates, you can't expect real quotes. So there are some things in the book about the wily and parsimonious Victor Navaski. And there are various sections of the book. There's a biographical section, and I thought since we were in a bookstore, I would start by reading something from the biographical section from my, I guess you'd call it my childhood in Kansas City. There's a quote at the beginning of each section, and the one in the biographical section says, "I found that a lot of people say they're from Kansas City when they aren't, just for the prestige." This is a piece called Chubby. It's common these days for memoirs of childhood to concentrate on some dark secret within the author's ostensibly happy family. It's not just common, it's pretty much mandatory. Memoir in America is an atrocity arms race. A memoir that reveals incest is trumped by one that reveals bestiality, and that in turn is driven from the bestseller list by one that reveals incestuous bestiality. When I went into the memoir game, I knew I was working at a disadvantage, a horrible disadvantage. As much as I would hate this getting around in literary circles in New York, the fact is that I had a happy childhood. At times, I've imagined how embarrassing this background would be if I found myself discussing childhoods with other memoirists, late at night at some memoirist hangout. After talking about their upbringings for a while, the glue-sniffing and sporadically violent grandmother, for instance, or the family tapeworm, they look toward me. Their looks are not totally respectful. They are aware that I've admitted in print that I never heard my parents raise their voices to each other. They have reason to suspect from bits of information I've let drop from time to time that I was happy in high school. I try desperately to think of a dark secret in my upbringing. All I can think of is Chubby, the collie dog. "Well, there's Chubby, the collie dog," I say tentatively. This is a true story. "Chubby, the collie dog," they repeat. There really was a collie named Chubby. I wouldn't claim that the secret about him qualifies as certifiably traumatic, but maybe it explains an otherwise mysterious loyalty I had as a boy to the collie stories of Albert Payson Terhune. We owned Chubby when I was 2 or 3 years old. He was sickly. One day, Chubby disappeared. My parents told my sister, Suki, the oppressor we call her, and me that he had been given to some friends who live on a farm, so that he could thrive in the healthy country air. Many years later, as I remember I was home on vacation from college, Chubby's name came up while my parents and Suki and I were having dinner. I asked why we'd never gone to visit him on the farm. Suki looked at me as if I had suddenly announced that I was thinking about eating the mashed potatoes with my hands for a while, just for a change of pace. "There wasn't any farm," she said. "That was just what they told us. Chubby had to be put to sleep." "Put to sleep?" I said. "Chubby's gone?" Somebody, my mother I think, pointed out that Chubby would have been gone in any case since collies don't ordinarily live to the age of 18. "Isn't it sort of late for me to be finding this out?" I said. My father said, "It's not our fault if you're slow on the uptake." I never found myself in a memoirist gathering that required me to tell the story of Chubby, but as it happened, I did relate the story in a book. A week or two after it was published, I got a phone call from Suki. "The collie was not called Chubby," she said. "The collie was called George. You were called Chubby." There's one section here called 20 Years of Paul's, one poem each. And the quote leading that section is, "I believe in an inclusive political system that prohibits from public office only those whose names have awkward meter or are difficult to rhyme, such as George Bush." I mean, I know it sounds like an easy rhyme. It rhymes with tush, but that's disrespectful. Fortunately, when George H.W. left office, he had a lot of middle names, so I wrote a poem, "Farewell to you, George Herbert Walker, though never treasured as a talker. Your predicates were prone to wander nounless off alone. You did your best in your own way, the way of Greenwich Country Day. So just relax and take your